Welcome to Module 3, Systems Dynamics as an Active Tool for Engagement. Module 3 is the third of the theory modules. This module will explore systems dynamics and how this approach to building models of a system's interactions and their dynamics can reinforce systems thinking, support communication, and capture ongoing learning and hypotheses about how a system influences health outcomes. This toolkit is an effort to capture our learning from the early stage systems change initiative with the Fred Hollows Foundation. As mentioned in previous modules, it is not an exhaustive exploration of the existing theories or concepts related to systems change, as there's significant information available, but it's an introduction to the prominent ones that informed our decision making. It is hoped that making these underlying concepts explicit will be a first step towards a shared language within the organization, and that this toolkit can be used to spark conversation and planning for the ways forward. In Module 3, we will present an overview of systems mapping and systems dynamics, an introduction to basic model components, and will provide an example of how to capture hypotheses about systems dynamics to make assumptions and opportunities for intervention more explicit. Systems dynamics is an approach to describing the interactions and nonlinear feedback mechanisms of complex systems. Many of these characteristics were introduced in Module 1. A system map is one of the core tools within system dynamics that allows us to both capture our hypotheses about how a system is functioning and allows us to test these hypotheses. A system map does more than just capture these hypotheses as well. It's a tool that can provide a way to support collaboration with actors across a system as we bring in various perspectives and voices to create a map, to modify and develop a map over time, and contribute to creating this unifying vision of how we would like the overall system to function and to capture our learning as we intervene in the system and get feedback information about if our hypotheses are correct, if our understanding or expectations of these dynamics are actually how the system responds. When we think about systems mapping, we start from a premise that all models are wrong because they are incomplete representations of reality. But some models are more useful than others. And this is a really important quote and perspective about how to approach systems mapping. It can sometimes be comforting to hold on to a map as something that has the answers or is a final product, especially when working in a complex situation where there's so many different options, so many pathways, and we're often exercising skills that aren't as strong as maybe more traditional approaches. And so the system map is one way for us to make our mental models explicit. So if you remember from Module 2, when we talked about systems change, the mental models are a huge factor that hold up the existing systems that contribute to health outcomes. The mental models are our understanding, it's the narrative about how we explain why various factors contribute to our ultimate health outcomes that we're trying to impact. Unfortunately, in many situations, we don't go beyond decision making from our mental model, but we kind of accept our mental model as fact and then push through our perspectives. And systems mapping requires us to take a moment to pause, to sit down, and to articulate what it is that we are assuming is happening in the world. What do we assume is influencing these health outcomes we're aiming to intervene? And then capture that within a model. Additionally, we want to maximize how useful this model is, right? Because they're all incomplete, but some are more useful than others. So we want to make our models as useful as possible. And one way that we do that is by including diverse perspectives from within the system that we're targeting, and including actors and voices from interconnected points that maybe are not as traditional or the expertise that we consider most relevant. But as we really consider these models, we find that they have an impact on eye health and have many opportunities as well for intervention. And so we want to sit and use this as a tool, not just to create a map, but to explore our hypothesis. What do we think is happening in the system that is resulting in our health outcomes? And therefore, How can we intervene in order to have a change to improve those health outcomes? And this can allow us, also related to a previously presented framework, the Cynefin framework, to do that step back that's related to complex thinking. So rather than relying only on expertise, maybe the people that are usually in the room planning a program or that come from an area like the eye health in this perspective, but to step back and ask who's missing? Who are the perspectives we don't have in the room? What is the context expertise? People from the local system that understand the other actors and influences on health that can come in and strengthen our model so that it's more useful and it's a better representation of the many factors that are influencing the outcomes we want to improve. Next, we'll talk a little bit about what are some of those components of a system map, and then go through some examples of what that might look like in this context of eye health. So one of the core aspects of a system map is called a stock, and this is something that can be measured. It's a quantity of something. So this may be the number of people with an illness or a disease, a number of health clinics, but it's something that can be very easily measured. A flow is the movement in and out of the stocks. And so these are some of those dynamics that we're trying to capture is how do people or objects or items move from one category, one stock to another stock. Feedback loops is something that we've been talking about a lot. And so these are the stimuli that can increase or decrease. These are, rather than being linear, these are the factors that feed back and can influence each other. Delays, as we know within a system, particularly in a system where we are looking at health, which can change over a lifespan, there are many delays. So there may be an intervention in childhood that isn't going to see impacts for maybe 5 or 10 years, such as changes in nutrition or access to nutrition. That's going to be a stimuli that happens at a certain point of time, but it won't be able to be immediately measured or captured. It'll take several years to see how that then influences a system. So those have to be considerations as well, that when an intervention is done, that some of these interactions will not only change how they kind of feed back to each other and how they interact, but it will also have a factor of time, that some will happen right away, such as maybe vaccination, very quickly improving immunity or vulnerability to an illness, versus a change in kind of diet or education, which may have generational or more long term impacts within the system. And then another important component is a boundary. And this is a decision we make about what is included in the model. And oftentimes this may be made implicitly without us being intentional or even acknowledging that we have made a decision about what the boundary is. And so it's important to make a decision around the boundary because within complexity, it's a lot. It's a lot to consider. And so we have to make some decisions about what do we have potential to have influence over, what are things we have potential to have impact on that we want to include so that the boundary is not too big and we're kind of frozen and don't know where to start. But we also don't want to make the boundary so small that we're then kind of not looking or not considering many other factors, such as if we're looking at a public health aspect or intervention, if we draw the boundary too small and maybe only look at a medical aspect, the medical sector, we've then lost a lot of very important components and influences. And so we may want to look beyond a health system and expand our boundaries so that we can incorporate other sectors. And this was a huge approach and important approach in this project where we've been really prioritizing a shift in that view so that we can include more sectors and more actors beyond just the health or eye health system exclusively and find other opportunities to have more sustainable and transformative changes around eye health. So here is a very simplified example of what a stock and flow could look like in this context. So the stocks are at either end of this small map. One stock is of people with a correctable vision impairment, and the other stock are people with restored vision. And so this map is looking at the impact of glasses on correctable vision. And the rate that individuals acquire glasses is called the flow. So that's the rate at which people flow from the stock of those with a correctable vision impairment to the stock of those with restored vision. So there may be an initiative that focuses on screening and delivering eyeglasses, which could have an impact of moving people from the left side of the map to the other side of the map. And potentially, if this were an intervention, then there could be a count of how many people were needing glasses in the beginning, and then how many got them and were now had restored vision. And while this is using many of the components of systems dynamics and systems mapping, it's essentially a linear model of doing one intervention at time point A and resulting in an outcome at time point B. Now, this is the same map, but with some additional information. One thing that's been done is the boundary has been broadened slightly. So rather than the boundary being around this simple intervention, it's expanding slightly to explore some of the other factors that may be influencing the dynamics of this intervention. So the stocks and the flow are the same, but now two factors influencing the rate of acquiring glasses have been added. One is the affordability. So some financial considerations, whether individuals have maybe health insurance, subsidized eyeglasses, are they able to acquire them? And another factor would be the access to the visual exam. So are people able to get that screening? Are they able to see a specialist that can then dictate or determine what type of lens they need? Now this third kind of visual of the map is still very simple, but you can see there starts to be additional factors. And so something that's been added here are feedback loops. And there's also an example of a delay in this map. So we still have the initial components of our stocks are the same, and our top flow of the rate of acquiring glasses is also the same. But there's also been added a flow that's moving people with restored vision back to the first stock of people with correctable visual impairment. And there are a couple of reasons that this could happen. One could be the glasses they receive or purchase become lost or damaged. And that's something that many of us have experienced. And so while you may have been in the stock with restored vision immediately following the receiving of these glasses, you've now kind of moved back to where you were before and need to kind of re-enter this system to restore the vision again. Another aspect which exemplifies a delay is the worsening of vision over time. So someone may have a visual exam, get their glasses, and have restored vision, but as they age or over the next few years, their vision is slowly getting worse, and then they need a new visual exam in order to get a different prescription and restore their vision. So over that time period, they also have moved into the stock of people with correctable visual impairment as their vision has declined over time. So glasses could be lost or damaged, immediately after receiving them within a couple weeks, or over several years, there can just be a natural decline. And that will represent a delay in the system as well. So people aren't just moving from one stock to the other in this map and staying there forever, but that they're continuing to move and that there's some new dynamics at play around how many people are able to maintain that quality of vision. And there are many considerations in order to support someone getting glasses one time to having quality vision throughout their lifetime. Importantly, engaging with mapping and system mapping is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time event that results in a final map, because by definition, these complex adaptive systems are dynamic, and so they're constantly changing over time. So a snapshot of how we believe a system is functioning at one moment, even if it's very, very close to accurate, is not always going to remain the same. And so this is an important approach to be used in an ongoing way. It supports us stepping back to identify additional dynamics and actors. So we're really thinking about our boundary and what are we considering? And is that broad enough? Do we need to step back to really include the multiple factors and stakeholders and sectors that are having an impact on our health outcome? System mapping requires multiple perspectives from the system to effectively build the most useful potential map. And so it's a great opportunity to engage others, to exercise those skills of interacting with the community. And we'll talk more about systems leadership in the next module, but it's a great way to engage people and facilitate, encourage those conversations and that sharing of perspectives, particularly with perspectives that haven't traditionally been included, that maybe have been excluded because they aren't seen as experts within this particular health issue. It's also important to remember that a system map can confirm our assumptions or mental models if we aren't open for new information, if we aren't truly testing and looking for information that could potentially contradict what we believe initially. And so we need to approach system mapping with openness and with curiosity and acknowledge that this is just our best estimate, our best guess about how things are functioning. But in a complex system, we will never truly understand all of these dynamics. And so it's okay for it to be wrong. There's an expectation that it's wrong because we're leaving a lot out. If a map had every single aspect in it, it wouldn't be helpful to us because we'd be back where we started, where we were dealing with too many factors to make decisions and to understand it. So a map is simplifying what's going on so that we can make decisions. And so therefore it will be incomplete. But it is an opportunity for us to step out of our traditional ways and to incorporate different types of expertise. Well, we have our content experts, which will always be valuable in our health work. There's also extreme value in the context expertise, local knowledge of what are the additional dynamics at play, what are the additional opportunities and barriers that are maintaining and perpetuating these health inequities and that really need to be incorporated and addressed for transformative change. And lastly, our maps are never final or correct. It needs to be a process and a skill that's developed over time. So as we intervene and are open to learning more about how the system is working, we also know how to modify our map, how to bring that information back in and build in new feedback loops, maybe modify what we thought was happening before so that the map becomes more robust over time and becomes a better tool for us to be able to make new decisions and determine our future interventions. If systems mapping is something that you're interested in incorporating into the work you do, there's a lot of information out there in additional training courses to get into the specific skill set of system mapping, including MIT, which has significant videos and webinars available for practicing and building your own models. The next module in this toolkit is Module 4, and this module is about systems leadership. In this module, I'll present a definition of what systems leadership is and what we were attempting to operationalize in this initiative, discuss how this differs from other forms of leadership in important ways to support systems change, and present core systems leadership skills that individuals can exercise to support systems change efforts.